This is episode 4 of Nobody Yet. I'm recording the following on December 6th at 10:36 p.m. The following is an episode with my first guest, so you're not going to have to see me just or hear me just rant for the next hour to myself like the past 3 episodes. So, hooray there. My first guest is Joon. He's someone I met through mutual friends in university, and admittedly, we weren't super close in university. We stopped talking or stopped seeing each other in class or on campus after COVID hit when everyone went their separate ways. But I follow him on Instagram, and his Instagram has some of the coolest stories of his yoga progression in the past 2 years to now where I see him do crazy things like just static handstands, crazy flexibility, like he's touching the bottom of his feet to the top of his head, just crazy stuff I've never seen before. In this episode, we talk about his journey in the past 4 years since university when we last spoke to each other. We talk about his journey in yoga and how that has shaped his perspectives on happiness, mindfulness, and pursuit. Now, if you know me or you've heard through my podcasts or read my writings, you would know that I just really love talking about life. And we do that a lot here. We have a lot of catching up to do and just kind of ramble on our current perspectives on life. So, lock in. Okay, so we started like in contact again after I think it was like I released like or I posted one of my articles online and you reached out and shot me a DM and we talked a little bit about like meditation and mindfulness. But now
Yeah,
I could
yeah.
actually talk to you and not just shoot DMs. So maybe to start off, what does mindfulness mean to you?
Um, I think there are going to be two ways, and from how you phrase the question, I feel like it's more of personal stuff. So I'm gonna start with the personal one.
Mm-hmm.
Like personally, it's a way to look into my inner self objectively, not subjectively. Like you could be really object because you're observing yourself by being mindful. That's the definition of being mindful. And in that state, um, you're sort of you know not you, but you're being you. It's like you're observing yourself, so you're not essentially like you're not equal as what you have been, but you can sort of like observe what you have been feeling, what you have been thinking, and by doing that, I think you're sort of like a detached from it. And what makes that experience very special is I think you can experience um, ultimate healing by doing it. And I don't know why exactly, but if the mindfulness gets deeper and deeper, and I experienced that I could sense some sort of like a very deep sympathy to past self
Mm-hmm.
because like let's say I felt a strong anger and if I'm not detached from it, my action would be dictated by that feeling, right? Because I felt anger and I would lash out on somebody, maybe my coworker or maybe my family or whoever it is, or maybe some like whatever it is, right? Maybe I was just walking by the crosswalk and there's some car that's like a very dangerous pedestrian and I'd be like lashing out on that car, right? But
Mm-hmm.
you're being objective um, and detached from your feeling, and you're like, oh, I am angry. Why are you angry? Why am I angry? Like there's a very subtle difference, but you're not being totally dictated by your feeling, but you're feeling it and you're, you know, aware of it. you're being mindful, aware of how you're feeling, how your sensation is. And I think from that, you're transitioning yourself from being a slave of your feelings to master of your feeling because you're not being dictated anymore. And that results, for me, what that resulted was um, being liberated from my past, very intense experiences, personal experiences. And
Mm,
that's what mindfulness is. It's like a ultimate healing experience by deepening the skill level of it, I guess.
mm.
But it's very hard to explain
So
in words. Yeah.
yeah, so I caught some things. So it seems like a big theme in mindfulness is, I don't know if this is the right analogy, but seeing like oneself in a third person is as if
Yeah.
your viewpoint of your spell of yourself kind of exited your own mind and your own field of vision, and now you're seeing yourself as some more hopefully impartial third person who can now kind of give advice to
Mhm.
yourself or judge yourself more fairly versus
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
oh, I
Yeah.
have these ingrained biases, emotions, and these kind of whims and impulses are going to dictate my
Yeah. I think
actions in the
that's
short term.
that's one big theme of explaining that status because it's just a status of one's body and mind. How it's being linked, like it's like a status of mutual link between mind and body, and that's just one way of explaining that status. Because in such status, you can be objective of your feelings and detached from it. But that's not the
Mm,
only, you know, it's like one of the side effects of being mindful, healing your past traumas or feelings. But there are many other, beneficial outcomes from it.
mm. And what was your journey for mindfulness like? The last time I spoke to you, and we talked a little bit earlier, but last time we spoke was probably like 2020 or something like that. And
Yeah,
after
yeah,
that, you just kind of disappeared. I only saw your Instagram and whatever. And
yeah.
recently, I saw a lot of, or like in the past year or 2 years, just a lot of posts of yoga, like you doing handstands
Yes,
or having
correct,
like this
correct.
crazy flexibility. So
Yeah,
how
exactly.
how did this start?
Okay, so in 2020, I wasn't doing anything seriously with the spiritual practices or healing practices, but I was always interested in and felt drawn to these, sort of actions, just being mindful. Because, during the school year, you remember that school, like from, ECE mail, they sent a lot of um, mindfulness sessions. Do you remember?
I
Like
don't
there
remember
were
because
lots of, you don't? Wow.
I was not mindful back then, and maybe now I'm not that mindful, but back then
Well, I
definitely
wasn't
not.
either. Yeah, I wasn't either, but
Hmm.
I was stressed a lot during the school years because, well, my environment, my inner circumstances, I was an international student and I was alone there, and I am not very good with my family,
Mm,
unfortunately. I want to make good with them, but I think that's I think it's main cause of, you know, my trauma. So, and studying there alone with 100 hours of study, very that was very intense for my inner self. So I think I was naturally drawn to those words, being mindful, doing meditation. I don't recall when I started to search about it, but do you know who Sasha is? Sasha Rico.
Sasha, I don't
Um,
think so.
he's one of our um mates in ACE, and he was also
Mm,
interested in those practices, and I went to a few sessions with him. And but after maybe 3 or 4 tries, I didn't find it that effective back then, and I was
mm,
swamped with all the assignments and exams.
Mm.
So, well, I figured out this is not that effective, and I'm done with my words, so I'm not gonna try anymore. And a few years had gone by, and you know, I started working at wait, I left school in early 2020, like right before COVID, like
Mm-hmm.
2 days before the COVID started, like exactly. That's when I
Okay, good
came back
timing.
to Korea. Yeah, and I quit the school. That was third year, second semester. I exactly remember. And what happened was I was getting some sort of like a very strong, intense, you know, um, how do I say it? Pain in my chest.
Mm.
It was just a pain in my chest. So I thought it was some sort of like a heart disease. Oh shit, I studied too hard. Now I'm getting heart disease? Like, I was so scared, man. Because
Uh-huh.
I put my hands on my chest and was beating irregularly. So I thought it was sort of
Mm.
like a arrhythmia. So I went to one of the emergencies. I think it was UHN in downtown Toronto. I went there and yeah, in midnight, and I came out probably like 5 a.m. and they said there's no problem with my heart. Like, what the hell
Mm.
are you talking about? I have a problem with my heart. I can't breathe.
Mm-hmm.
I can't think. I can't, move. So I got really scared, and I hope, I really hope it, you know, disappears, but it didn't. So I decided I had to keep the school and come back to Korea because medical system here is much better than what it is
Mm.
in Canada. So, so I came here to see the you know like the cardiac center. Yeah, to
Mm.
visit the cardiac center and get lots of tests. And they said there's no problem. And what they told me was very like shocking back then. And I cried right after I left the hospital. They told me that I was getting panic attacks, so I have to go visit um the get some therapies and treat some medications. And I never imagined that I was getting panic attacks. Because like panic attacks, lots of celebrities get it, right?
Yeah.
Especially in Korea, it is. So from their description and the thing I was experiencing back then was that they were not matching. I never imagined. And I started taking medications for like 3 or 4 years, and what it basically did was just making me numb about all my feelings
Mm.
so that I was calm and I was able to think, but I wasn't able to feel. Yeah. And after 3 or 4 years, my personal life hit me back, and I was still working in Korea for my alternate military service,
Mm.
and everything was sort of like a you know destructing it by itself. All my stuff in my life, my girlfriend and my work, my family, it was so much more painful than before. So um, I was still taking my medication, but it wasn't working like before. Like my panic attacks was not treated by the medication. Like it didn't
Mm.
work anymore because my symptoms got much more severe. So I realized I have to do something else, and I tried a lot of things. Like I tried learning piano, vocals, because I was really interested in music, and like 5 or 6 stuff, and yoga was one of those. And I found out that right after yoga, that's exactly 2 years ago. So what you said was pretty accurate about, you know, as to when you started seeing the yoga pictures from my Instagram story. And yeah, that's when it started. Like It's 2022 August 2nd. I remember the date. I went to the yoga session,
Mm,
and right after the yoga session, my mind was just calm and thoughtless, and I was peaceful actually. And
mm,
I was like, what? I did so many other things to, try to calm my mind, and even the medication couldn't. Right after the yoga, I was actually okay, like actually okay, not deceiving myself. Like I was actually okay. So I found it pretty magical
mm,
because none of the other things in this world could do that. Even the meditations, which was the result of modern science, modern just all that pharmacology industry couldn't do it, but yoga did it
mm,
for me. So
mm,
maybe there's something to it that I'm not fully aware of. So what I did was never skipping yoga, like daily yoga session. That was the first thing I did. And I kept doing it, doing it,
mm,
doing it. Although I got, my symptoms came back maybe next morning, or maybe something very anxious happens in the work or with my family. But I always just stop everything. And when the time comes, I just go to yoga, and
mm.
just everything was okay. And yeah, that's basically how it started.
What was different about this yoga session than the mindfulness practice you did previously? You mentioned you did a couple classes at you did a university when you were still there, and they didn't really work out. Was that like a function of the environment or the state you're in? What was different about yoga and it
I
just
think what's
clicking
your
so
like
perfectly?
environment and all that stuff. But there's gonna be a lot of factors, right? Because life is just there always it's multi-factor circumstances, right?
Mm,
But I think the major difference is using your body or not. Like whether you're using your body or not, that was the major difference. Because the mindful practice I did previously in the school was I didn't use my body. I just sit by for like maybe 30
mm,
minutes and put my attention on my breath or my, the current moment. But now I look it back, and now I am able to do those practices as well and look it back. And theoretically, I assume that breathing exercises are much harder than using your body directly because mind is very very subtle. Once you think about your mind, the status of your mind changes. It's conditioned on your time. It's conditioned on current moment and the moment right before the current moment, and all the feelings you have felt through your entire life, and all the external sensory signals are factors that affect your mind. It's very subtle, and we are not that sensitive if you're not trained enough, and especially these, humankind these days, they're not trained enough. They're not sensitive enough for their mind to notice you know, all those effects that's being delivered from all those factors. So
mm,
just just sitting quiet and still, not moving your body, and you start to control your mind using your mind, which was already impaired. It just it doesn't make sense. You're trying to control the mind, but your mind was already impaired, right? So
mm,
it's a very hard thing to do. Just staying still and trying to focus on the current moment because your mind has been trained to focus on external stuff entire life, and now you just start to focus on your inner self, sitting still without anything, any help. or any, tools is much harder. I think. Focusing on your breathe is one of the tools that you can use to get into the mindful and meditative state. But I think breathe is a harder tool. Like it's much harder tool to, manipulate, I think. Like
Mm.
maybe I'll give you an analogy to coding.
Yeah.
So let's say you're coding in C++, plus plus,
Okay.
and now you have to debug your code, right?
Uh-huh.
And it's like
The most
you're using,
worst part.
yeah, yeah. It's like, let's say you have two options, GDB and your IDE, in
Uh-huh.
which you can put a lot of, breakpoints and more UIs, and definitely the latter is much easier for you, like for beginners, right? Unless you're very
Mm.
accustomed to GDB. And I think it's like, I don't know if it was a good analogy, but that's one thing I can give to you as a,
Yeah.
you know, colleague programmer.
Yeah, okay. So it's kind of having yoga there as a like having another thing there that you're not solely focused on breath or just trying to sit there silently. So it's kind of having the movement, the positioning, and the difficulty there
Yeah,
as well
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
helps you be more in the moment of trying to
Yes,
focus,
yes,
hold
yes,
those
yes,
positions,
yes.
and
But
naturally
now you're
breathing
using
kind of comes
your,
into play.
yeah, yeah, exactly. But now you're using your just body and the sensation from the body as a tool to get into the current moment and to get into the mindful status. Because, body
Mm,
sensations are much strong, like they're much stronger than breathe. Like,
yeah.
like think about the time you went to the gym, right? The pain from muscles,
Mm.
they're much stronger. So you have to focus on it unless you want to, you know, die, die from the weights. You have to focus on your muscles. And
Yeah, yeah.
sensation from muscle is only in the current moment.
Mm. So it's a shift. So it's kind of like a practice that shifts, that forces your attention to be in the moment versus kind of breathing where you don't really have to be in the moment and there's no detriment because you're just sitting there quietly anyways. It's not like you will fall or something would happen if you were to leave that specific moment in time. I guess there's no consequence there versus yoga is like an active activity
Mm.
that you're there. And maybe this
It's more
could
active. Yeah.
mm,
Mhm. It's
and
more
maybe
active.
this could like extrapolate to many other activities like sports or gym, but maybe of
Hmm.
course not as
Hmm.
effective as yoga in kind of a pure relaxation thing that you mentioned earlier.
Well, yoga is not that relaxing. Like it
Hmm.
depends on which type of yoga you're doing, but once you get deeper and deeper in the field of yoga, very like in terms of they call it asanas, the yoga poses,
Hmm.
and I think if you're trying very advanced asanas, it's not gonna be really relaxing. It's gonna be so painful,
Mm.
and but the pain is so big that you have to focus on that pain unless you get injured. So that it's a very strong signal from the current moment that your mind has to be calm and your mind has to focus on the current moment. That's how asanas come in play and kind of like attract your mind to this very current moment. I think, and the breathing is pretty much the same because you're just think about it. You're exhaling, you're inhaling only exists in the current moment.
Mm.
Like think about it. It's not in the past. It's not in the future. It's 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 in present, right? You're always breathing
Yeah.
in present moment. It's a very sort of like a so simple truth that people don't even think about it. But the breathing is always in the
Mm.
current moment. It's in the presence. But it's so subtle because we're always breathing. And also one special thing about breathing is it's regulated by our consciousness and unconsciousness at the same time. And none of the things in our, bodily structures work like that. Breathing is very special. So what, in this spiritual practice, breathing is called a door to the unconsciousness because it's controlled
Okay.
by both consciousness and unconsciousness. So
Mm-hmm.
that once you try to control your breath using your consciousness, you have to face the unconsciousness which is also controlling your breath. So it's like a one, middle, like door located in the middle where consciousness and unconsciousness meet all together. It's like a,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So it's a
it's
very
kind of
special
like
thing. It's very subtle. Yeah.
uh-huh. It's like a bridge between everything.
Hmm.
One thing
Hmm.
I'm quite curious about. So you mentioned that yoga kind of clicked when you're going
Hmm.
through kind of all the stress and the medication, and yoga seemed to be the answer. I mean, we had this
Yes.
whole like conversation about breath and mindfulness.
Hmm.
Did you experience like I guess the benefits or realize the benefits of um, maybe breath work or mindfulness immediately in the first session? Like, what was special about that session? And then, what was the progression like over the past 2 years
Oh,
of
my,
diving more into yoga?
like day-to-day practices,
Yeah, or like the
like
first
more
time you
more
practice
practical.
yoga. Yeah, or maybe
I,
let's
I don't.
let's think about the first time you did yoga.
Yeah.
What was special about that moment? And also, did the realization of the importance of breath come very early on, or did that kind of come a little bit later as you progressed a little bit more?
I think I probably like unconsciously knew about the importance of breath, but I my realization after the first session was just that I was peaceful. I was actually okay. That I think that was it
Mm,
after the first session. Like, you know, I went to the session probably like 7 or 8 p.m. I don't recall exactly, but and the yoga room was not that bright. Like they turned off all the lights and just very small lights. So it's dimmed, which is already calming.
mm-hmm,
And I try to do all those, stretchings back then because I wasn't able to do any asanas. So it was basically stretching. And, like just think about you do stretchings too, right? Like you code for a
mm-hmm.
long hour and you finish the work and you do something like this stuff, right?
Yep.
And it's very, it feels good. And you go to yoga session and you do that for an hour and for your entire body, like for your pelvis, for your, shoulders and for your, leg. And yeah, after that 1 hour, I just focus on my body and breathe for that entire hour. And after that, ta-da, I was feeling okay. That was just basically what happened. So I just say that's just it. That like from my point of view, I'm like, okay, I'll just go to yoga and try it, do it, and just focus on my body and breathe as per the instructions and come out. And I was just feeling okay magically.
Mm,
So that's why I decided to dig into it. I wanted to know why, but I don't know. The more I dig into it, the more mysterious it gets. The more mysterious things happen on the way. So what I think these days is just a law of nature. It's basically a law of nature. You focus on your body, and your mind focuses on your body, and your mind and body reconnects all together, and they are not separated anymore, and
Mm-hmm.
you just become happy. And I think that's the definition of being happy: reconnection with your body and oneness
Mm.
of mind and body. And that's just yeah, that's just it. Yeah, you never do something that your body tells you no, because you're always sensitive about your body.
How has yoga or this practice of like mindfulness, how have it shaped your perception on happiness?
I think it changed from a lot of people say it, but it changed from external factors to internal factors. Because before doing it, happiness was always about something outside. It's very, I don't know, it sounds very typical,
Mm.
but it actually is, yeah. It was always external factors doing, getting more, getting better GPAs when I was back in school and getting a good internship and I don't know, more money. I thought so. Like getting more money would be not entirely happy, like make me happy, but well, better, you know, better status of life. So
Mm-hmm.
that's linked to happiness. But I realized it's entirely internal. That's what I realized. No external thing can dictate your ultimate happiness. That's my perception change, I think.
Mm. So now happiness is much more of a like internal practice. I guess in that sense,
Yeah.
is
It's like
happiness
an
something that
acceptance.
like an acceptance
It's
of
a,
current
yeah,
outcomes or like current standards?
just everything. Everything that's happening on your life. You accept it, like, you actually accept it, and what's left is happiness. Like, after you accept all your miseries and, you know, ambitions or jealousy, and what's left behind that acceptance is not a big happiness, but it's like a result of happiness, a small happiness, but that lasts for much longer time and much more
Mm.
powerful. I make analogy to last year, like, you know, like in, Antarctica. It moves very slowly, but it does move.
Mm.
And no one can push it out, right? And the happiness with that's coming internally, coming out of internal status. It's like a glacier. It can't be
Mm.
pushed out. It's just coming out. It's just there.
Hmm. One thing I'm curious about, and you mentioned this change in how you view happiness from, let's say, more external factors. So that's the money, the status, the GPA,
Hmm.
to something more internal,
Hmm.
kind of like it's kind of like a mind state that you just have that comes from
Yes.
acceptance, and I'm sure gratefulness is there as well. How do
Hmm.
you kind of smooth the differences between the external and the internal? Like, for example, like I could talk about me. I'm very driven by goals. Of course, not goals
Hmm.
in the sense of money and status. I think I've also learned in the past 2 years that it's not for me. Um, but then there's now this kind of, I don't know, conflict is a little bit too harsh of a word because it's not a conflict, but it's just kind of like this thought of, well, I like to always pursue things, and the pursuit of things make me happy, not the actual
Hmm.
achievement of it. But then there's like the other sense of the gratefulness of it all as well, in which I love pursuing things, one, which maybe kind of leads to the external stuff, whatever. But I also really enjoy and am grateful of like my present state in life. Like, I think those are a little bit more internal things. How do you rationalize between the two? it seems when we talk about happiness, it feels like it's always one or the other, or it comes out being one or the other. People either chase status or all these sins and whatever, or they kind of they're grateful with nothing. Not to say that there is like grateful with fully nothing, but that's kind of the picture that is painted. How do you kind of rationalize
I
between these two?
think I am still rationalizing it, but
Mm,
I think recently I had some breakthrough in terms of rationalizing those. Was
okay.
that they are not two separate things. They could be one actually. If you just become yourself, become your, internal reconnection with your body and the mind. If that happens, those two things are not separate. You know what I'm saying? Like you're pursuing things, but you're not pursuing that your body tells you no. But if you're not able to hear your body, you might there's a high possibility that you're chasing something that your body doesn't want. Like
Mm,
there's a very subtle difference between these two. Like even if you're not that sensitive to your body and you haven't connected with your body, but that doesn't mean that you're doing something that's entirely off from your actual pursuit. You could also be doing what you actually want to do from deeper and inner self without doing those practices, those traditional practices, because we're you know in a way like we're already designed to hear our body and based on our body. That's it's inherent in within our biological system. But what's happening in these days is you're just trained to focus on external factors, like you know what kind of goal do you have? Like what like recently, not those monies or status or then
mm.
what are you chasing?
Yeah. For me, I think the thing that gives me the most fulfillment is figuring out what my biological potential is. Like if there is some
Hmm.
limit out there in which I can no longer cross. And maybe it's not
Hmm.
biological per se. Maybe in terms of fitness it is. But
Hmm. You want to know
is
your
there
limit
like yeah, like what is that line? Is there a line in the first place? And like to explore that.
in
That's
terms of
what
why, in what field, software.
in almost anything. Like maybe anything is too broad, but maybe I think of it in terms of like several categories. Like fitness for sure is one because that's really quantitative that you can really measure. Um, the other ones are definitely in terms of work or like a career.
Hmm. Hmm.
I don't see a career as like a career. I see it as like a hobby. I like to do, or like I like to try to pursue what I like to do.
Hmm.
So it's seeing how far I could go with that in terms of making more impact or doing more of what I love, kind of et cetera there. And maybe also in terms of like socially, like how can I get better at communicating or talking to people and being more social? Like it's really outside of fitness, it's really like hand wavy. Like I want to be the best version of myself somewhere out there and figure it out. But it's really nebulous. It's not kind of as measurable as like how much net worth do I have or what my GPA is.
Hmm.
Do you think you have something now? So you practice mindfulness for 2 years. You went through all the struggles that you have in university, and then during COVID when you went back to Korea.
Hmm.
Do you feel like there's an overall theme in life or like a goal? Like, for example, my pursuit of figuring out what my limits are. Do you feel like you have something that now you're zeroing in on, that you're focusing on, now that kind of we're no longer, or you're no longer focused on things like money or like status?
I'm still figuring out, but one major thing would be deepening my practices. Is what
Mm.
I'm doing now is Ashtanga yoga and Vipassana practice. And what's really important about those practices is doing every day. And I think that includes a lot of things. Doing it every day means a lot of things because you shouldn't be, punishing yourself to do it every day. You have to enjoy doing it, enjoy the practice. That's the real meaning of doing it every day. So I try to accomplish, if there's a goal, accomplish that status in my daily life. And
Mm.
that would be, working as well, because I go to work and before I started doing all this stuff, the practices, what I was doing was working until like 4 a.m. and pushing my limits in the work.
Mm.
And I don't do that anymore. I I try to be more generous about myself and I stop working just quit the office at before 9 and come home and
Mm.
prepare for the next day because I do the practice in early morning and I have to get up by 6:30 or 6:20 like that.
Mm.
And I drink tea and I talk to myself. I do some meditation. That's basically talking to myself. I don't actually talk. Right. I
Yeah.
listen to all my body sensations and do the practice and go to Ashtanga yoga. And that lasts for like almost 2 hours. And now then go to work. So doing that every day and also doing a great job at the work, but without making any, major troubles with my coworkers,
Mm.
without, you know, punishing myself. Like before practice, I was like whenever I'm like, I cannot figure out something when I'm maybe, for example, debugging something, I can't figure it out, and I always got really mad. Like, fuck, why is it not working?
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm so freaking dumb. And I got always anxious about my status in the work. Like, oh, what other people would think of me. Oh, I'm so incapable of doing all these things. And but now I'm more tolerant on myself. I think I'm pretty much doing the same work, right? But
Mm.
how I view it and how I handle the things, it's very subtly different. Right? It's the same things are happening, but I'm peacefully handling and dealing with all this stuff. I think that's the major difference, and that's might be also an answer to the question you previously asked. I think
Mm.
you're basically doing the same thing, but you're doing it peacefully. So they're not two separate things. Being meditative and being mindful and pursuing the goals, but you're just pursuing more peacefully and in more present moment.
Mm. So it's more in like the methodology of how you execute that pursuit.
Yeah, yeah. If you can phrase it like that.
Yeah, in my very pursuit driven brain of how I think of things. One thing I'm curious about is you mentioned just there like a daily routine of trying to get home before 9 from the office and needing to wake up early to do yoga. How did you develop that routine? What was the process like in terms of iterating and figuring out what was right for you?
I think in the early stages, I tried a lot of types of practices. There are of course many types of yoga: Ashtanga,
Hmm.
Vinyasa, Hatha yoga, Yin yoga, and there are many more like Bikram in US and Jivamukti and a lot more worldwide. People have
Hmm.
created many types of modern yoga as well. So I tried pretty much everything that I could try in Korea, and I tried to, what I tried was I tried to, um, capture and my status right after the practice as accurate as possible, so that I can, sort of weigh all these different practices
Mm.
to choose one practice to stick with. And I and what's left is Ashtanga for my daily practice. I still do other stuff from time to time, other types of yoga from time to time, but Ashtanga is one thing that's left. And what Ashtanga asks for you is it traditionally asks you to practice in the morning before you eat the breakfast, before you eat anything.
Mm.
So people usually practice anytime between 3 a.m. to 7 a.m. That's the usual
Jeez. Okay,
start
that's
time
early.
of Ashtanga yoga. Yeah. But like
Mm.
3 a.m. might be too much. It would be like very professional teachers, like who have done practice for like 20 years. They would practice at like 3 a.m. and they practice for
Mm.
2 hours or 2.5 hours, and then they teach. So that would be like 5 a.m. Right?
Yeah.
Then yeah. So So naturally, it became 7 a.m. for me, 7 a.m. or 6:30 a.m. Because that was the starting time of my class that my teacher was teaching. And one thing that's very
Mm.
important in Ashtanga Yoga is the relationship between your teacher and yourself. There's a term called guru. Have you heard of the term?
Yeah. Guru, right? Guru.
Guru, yeah. Yeah, GRU. There's a term guru. And it's something more than just a teacher. It's a spiritual teaching. It's a spiritual practice, right? So it's like you know, if you compare it to Christianity, it's a pastor.
Mm.
Or if you compare it to, Buddhism, like traditional Buddhism, it's a monk. But yoga is not dependent on any types of religion. So it's just called guru.
Hmm.
So what I find, so what's very important is you have to find a teacher or guru that's working with you. Like you find, like there may be teachers that don't go along very well with you. Their characteristics doesn't fit that much with you, and you don't find the classes. You don't find yourself focused in your class, or you don't find yourself peaceful. Maybe some words are, disturbing from your teachers. Like your ego is saying, like, I don't want to be here. Then in such environment, you cannot keep practicing. You have to find a new teacher. But that doesn't mean that teacher is unqualified. It just doesn't fit to you. So for me, I found my teacher, and I knew he's my teacher. He'd be my guru.
Mm.
So I just knew it. And yeah, and she starts teaching at 6:30, and that's gonna be just my starting time, and I'm gonna fit into it.
Mm. So a lot of it is just trial and error, figuring out the right type of yoga, and then figuring out the right type of guru, and then kind of
Hmm.
that schedule naturally falls in place of needing to
Yes.
yoga in the morning, and then work, and then
Yeah.
you need to sleep a little earlier because you need to wake up earlier, so on and so forth.
Hmm. Yeah. If I had to practice maybe at 1 p.m., because because I was doing different type of yoga, I wouldn't be getting a full time job.
Mm. Yeah, that makes sense. I think one thing that I hear a lot of people ask, and for me, like I used to wake up really early to go work out. So like
Hmm.
work out at 5, which isn't the most productive for working out because body's just tired when you're waking up that early
Hmm.
if it doesn't fit your circadian rhythm. But one thing I hear people say a lot is, "Oh, that seems like really crazy of waking up really early," and then it's also like maybe just not for them. So it seems like there's a lot of distraction or like detractors saying, "Oh, like that's too difficult." I guess what would your comment be in terms of maybe if someone says to you, "That's cool. It's too hard for me. I can't do Ashtanga yoga like that."
I can't push themselves. Like you could put someone at the tree, but that someone has to get the fruit by itself, by oneself, right? There's a some like
Mm,
a saying in I think I think one of the gurus said like what the gurus are doing is putting you up on the tree, but you have to get the fruit by yourself. So I can't say a lot of things about that. You have to work on yourself. You just keep
yeah.
doing it. Yeah, yeah. Because I cannot go to everyone and make them wrong. It's just choice made by you, and yeah, it's just choice. It's difficult at the first time, but you just keep doing it. It gets easier and easier, and you have to be patient, and you have to, patiently wait and endure until your body is, accustomed to it, accustomed to waking up early, and that's when magic starts.
Mm,
Maybe I don't know. Like I don't think I've ever seen people saying those stuff have tried waking up early more than half a year. Maybe do it 3 months, like every day, and I don't think anyone's gonna say otherwise if you have already tried waking up early 3 months and do the workout every day, because
mm,
you would find
yeah.
yourself feeling totally different, and you would find yourself very energizing. So so you'd just automatically wake up early to feel that feeling again, that healthy feeling. That's just someone cannot give it to you. You can give it to yourself, right?
Yeah, it's kind of a long-term commitment over like a long duration of time to actually see
Hmm.
like the compounded benefits of
Hmm.
whatever like practice
Yeah,
that is. I think
yeah,
one thing
yeah.
I'm also quite curious about is, did you have any doubts on like your practice, like whether it was
Of
actually
course.
effective or not?
Sometimes
How
I
did you
do. Yeah,
wrestle with that? How do you continue if like despite those doubts?
you
Maybe you
still
don't
believe it.
see the results that mm,
You're just aware of that you're having this belief, and you're being aware. Now, this doesn't dictate all your actions. Oh, I have this belief. Well, let's see how long it lasts. And I found out 99% of the time it doesn't last that much. You just don't quit. You just stay with it. You believe your past self, and you believe what it had already done for you, what your teacher had already done for you, what the practice had already done for you, and all the case studies that exist with these practices.
mm,
So if I'm feeling that way, maybe I should wait. And and also one thing more is that all these spiritual practices, they usually like theoretically and from all the cases that if real healing is happening, you would there's gonna be a time that you will have some sort of disbelief with your practice, because you have to feel through the pain to experience the ultimate feeling. So I read the text and I just decided to believe it.
mm. So it's that belief before seeing any results. Maybe in the beginning kind of felt like uncertain, but it's just like just committing and don't see results
In the
now, but
beginning,
it's a belief that I'll see it later.
I think in the beginning, like for me, it was much easier because I was going through so much panic attacks when I started yoga,
Mm,
and the yoga was the only cure that I could find back then. So it sort of like replaced taking medications for me. Like I had to take medication anyways. So I had to do yoga to work, to, stay sane. So
Mhm.
yeah, just like there was no reason for me to not do the yoga because it was already effective and it was never not effective. So yeah, I think it was only after my practice got deeper that I had that kind of disbelief. But at that time, I already had so much experience of healing it. Heal, the healing, a lot of healing already happened, so it was much easier to deal with that types of feelings, I guess.
So it's having like some evidence early on, and then just using that small amounts of evidence to continuously
Yes.
reinforce that belief, and then
So
you're
yeah, sort
still
of like that.
yeah, and then you're still doubts. Like it's not like there aren't doubts, but you just acknowledge the doubts and you continue forward, sort of thing.
Yeah. And there are a lot of other people in the world who are already doing Ashtanga, and it seems like they're happy.
Mm-hmm.
They're
Yeah,
actually happy. So yeah.
makes sense. What does an ideal life look for you right now? I guess we talked about mindfulness. We talked about your journey through yoga. We talked about
Hmm.
happiness.
Hmm.
Now, having all those different puzzle pieces, how do you currently see what an ideal life looks like? What is your current perspective on that?
Presence is the present moment is always ideal. I think if you
Mm,
accept everything, it's just ideal because you have accepted everything. You know what I'm saying? You have accepted all the notions on your life, and it's already ideal. You know what I'm saying? Like the presence always giving you everything. The life
mm,
always provides something. Always provides. Just you that knowing it, I think. And
So,
I think having that ideal picture is the starting point of misery, I think. You need to break that that imagination. There's no such thing as ideal life.
hmm. So this goes more into the acceptance thing, where
Yes.
I guess if we're talking about like no such thing as ideal life, but maybe you frame it more as there's no such thing as like an ideal life in which people generally lust after. Like they think, oh, that ideal life is someone like with a full family and like a lot of money and status or whatever. But what you're saying is an ideal life is actually the life that you currently live right now. But the idealness
Mhm.
doesn't come with like the reality of like what the actual facts are, but it comes with the internal
Mhm.
texture of how you accept that and
Mhm.
rationalize it and live with that
Mhm.
on a day-to-day basis.
Mhm. Yes. Yes. Because every life is unique, and all the idealness is dictated by ideology of the society. And if you realize the
Hmm.
uniqueness of one's life, there's no such thing as ideal. The present moment is always ideal.
The present moment is always ideal. Well said.
Yes. There's no
One
thing
last
to change.
question.
Yeah.
No things, Chase. One last. Okay, that goes against what I think, but I
There's nothing
digress.
to change. Just things come
I
to you.
digress.
You just become you, and just things come to you.
Mm. Yeah, I like that idea of acceptance. Maybe almost to like an extreme perspective. One like book that I love, of course, is like the Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. I
Hmm.
think it's a really common one in terms of like Stoicism. Um, where and like another one is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, and the books essentially
I know that too.
focus on like controlling your inner mind, and your
Hmm.
perspectives, because that's the only thing you can control. I mean, the
Hmm.
outcomes just are outcomes, like they happen, like
Hmm.
things come to you, but it's up to
Hmm.
you to actually control your reaction to them coming to you.
Hmm. So one thing I want to add is that the more I talk about it, the less meaningful it becomes about this status or the practices, because the words don't have anything. The language and the words are just a tool to transfer the actual status or the actual thing, right? Like, let's say when we talk about emotion, like mad or happy. Oh no, happiness is not emotion for me. Well, mad or anger, let's say anger.
Uh-huh.
It's just combination of five letters. It doesn't exist. There's no such thing as actual anger. It's sensations that actually exist. The status of the angerness is the only thing that exists, not the actual anger exists. It's just a five combination of letters that people invented to transfer such status to the other person. You know
Mhm.
what I'm. There's no such thing as actually those five letters. It's just syllables.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to say is that the more you describe the status with the language, the more sticky you become with the description itself. But what's really
Mm.
important is something beyond it. Just like anger, what's important about that word is you are in the status of anger, not the word anger itself. But with this spiritual practice and mindfulness, it's so hard to experience that status just one time because you're never mindful and the society never teaches you to be mindful. But once you experience that status, just once you experience it, there's no, it becomes totally different, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think there's this overall in general, like this speaks to like the difficulty I think with mindfulness, and like we what we touched upon, or what you touched upon a lot in here, of like mind states. Bringing language to it does make it a bit difficult, because when like people say words
Yeah.
like happy, sad, there is some
Hmm.
connotation to it that's reinforced by society and just by growing up. Like one example that's maybe a tangent is rain. Like rain, people always say rain is a bad thing, right? But of course rain doesn't
Hmm.
have to be a bad
Hmm.
thing. It's just the weather, it's just water's coming down. But
Yeah.
there needs to
Yep.
be like the difficulty here now is there is some mind state, but we need to like kind of point a finger at it and say like what is that, like to determine
Yeah.
that, so
Yeah.
it could be
Yeah.
communicated and it's not kind of this nebulous like magical thing that like we're just kind of
Hmm.
dancing around, right? It has to be a, this is what we're talking about, so people could understand. And then also like I think there's other aspect of when you kind of get into energy and like this whole idea of energy and things like that,
Hmm.
I think people like tend
Hmm.
to just like shut off and they just think, okay, just some like woo woo stuff, like they're just saying energy and they don't really know what they're saying, and we don't know what they're saying either. So I think that's where language comes in, of like giving legitimacy to kind of these very subjective mind states, um
Hmm.
even though language might not be like the best way to put it or like the most accurate way to describe it.
I think language is the only way to put it and to transfer the status.
Yeah.
It's the only way, but that's not. You just need to be aware of that. It's not everything, and it's just a way of communicating.
Hmm.
What's important is that status.
Yeah. Status
Hmm.
of what is underneath the
Being
language, like
mindful.
what that language actually
Hmm.
points to. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Mindfulness.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Okay. One last question.
Hmm.
And this is like one of the three questions I prepared. I didn't prepare that much. I just kind of see where this conversation takes us.
Hmm.
What is something that you want to tell your future self if you ever come back and listen to this episode?
The air is cool.
The air is cold.
That's in. Yeah, that's it. Just the present moment.
Is it? Very much in the moment indeed.
Yes. Well, and just one more, you know, thing that I'm recently noticing is that I feel like past me and future me is also some sort of like a hallucination. It doesn't exist
Mm,
either. What's happening is your mind, your ego. It sort of like piles everything up and tries to combine. But past me and current me and future me, they're all distinctive. They are independent of each other. But what's making them combined and dependent on each other is our mind. Because, there's no such thing as past me. I am only here. I'm at the current moment. But it's in only within our brain or our consciousness, right?
mm.
It doesn't exist. Maybe in your photos, but where does it exist? If you like think about it, there's no past me. There's no future me. It hasn't come yet.
Spoken very much like a person who lives in the moment indeed.
Yeah, it feels like I don't know. I don't want to think about the future. I don't want to think about the past. I want to totally be free of everything and live in the moment. Because
The air is cold. Yeah.
yeah, the air is cold.
But yeah,
I don't want to
that's it.
try to make something to tell myself because that would be reinforcing my, you know, some aspect of my mind.
Hmm.
I don't know. I might say
Cool.
you're doing great, but what's the point of
Yeah,
it?
there might not be a point of it. It'll be interesting. Like, if you ever come back and listen, I think it's always interesting to hear who we are at a specific point in time. And it's kind of like having
Mhm,
the genuine look versus kind of one that's biased by hindsight or by the results that happened between then and now, or
oh,
like what you learned, So yeah,
oh, I
that's how
find
I
that would be
romanticize this.
that's interesting too.
Yeah,
I like
that's
that
how I
point too.
romanticize this.
Yeah.
Yeah, but cool. Yeah, thank you for coming on
Mhm.
as my
Yeah.
first guest. Yeah,
Well, how'd you like it? How'd you find it?
yeah, it was fun.
Did you find
I
it? Did you find it hard to understand? Did you find it sort of like cloudy?
I think for me, like I definitely have my own, like a lot of books and not legitimate like dedicated mindfulness practice, but like more like committed, let's say, like probably more than an
Mhm,
average person. I
mhm,
live quite far from the subway, like a 15-minute walk. And what I love to do is walking to the subway and walking back, like
mhm,
before work and after work, is I just like to let my mind wander. And that just
mhm,
lets me to like be very grateful of
mhm,
present life.
mhm,
Um, helps me reorient my day a little bit, and also just lets me
mhm,
think things through really well. Um,
mhm,
So I think that's like my built-in mindfulness day, that the mindfulness which I have to
Mhm,
commit to because I have to walk to the subway.
mhm.
Um,
I think you're already
yeah,
doing great in terms of the mindfulness practice because I think you already are very familiar with all these notions, and I think you already have the experience actually. You're already experiencing the status. I think what the rigorous practice does for you is just just sharpening those skills and moments so that you can more be intentional in terms of using it
yeah,
and
that's the
utilizing those energies. Yeah, it's just about
yeah,
sharpening
the
the
energies.
skills. Yeah, and you already have I think you already have the starting point.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully I have a starting point. The big part is like actually using things. I think it's very easy to like think things through, or just like think things how things should be, but like
Mm-hmm.
not actually do anything about it. And I think that is something
Mm-hmm.
that we work on now, of putting things to action, um,
Mm-hmm.
to actually have some impact on my
Mm-hmm.
life versus some thought that I no longer
Mm-hmm.
think after like a week and there's no like actual impact or improvement.
Mm-hmm. I think the major perspective change was when I realized that I wasn't adding anything more when I'm doing the practice. I'm subtracting everything. And when I realized that, I think there was such a big perspective change for me.
Mm.
You're not like trying hard to get into the state. You're just letting everything go. You're subtracting everything.
Subtracting anything versus adding.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's simplifying things. I think that's
Hmm.
something that
Hmm.
often is underestimated as well. I think a simple life,
Hmm.
or like just things being simple, just clears mind space as well, and it creates more
Hmm.
focus in things that
Hmm.
matter more than
Hmm. Yeah,
the
yeah,
hundred
exactly.
things that
And
don't really matter.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and you can channel your energy, which is limited already, to a really important
yeah,
thing that you actually want.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Mhm. I think it was Steven Spielberg who said the dream doesn't shout, it almost murmurs to you.
yeah, yeah. I remember
Yeah.
watching a video as a kid that says like the dream always whispers, it never shouts.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
but you
yeah,
have to
yeah,
like
exactly.
listen closely to hear what whispers and never shouts every day.
Yeah,
Just
yeah, and to
try to
listen
hear
that
it.
you have to subtract everything.
Yeah. Everything that doesn't matter. Just remove it.
Hmm. Hmm.
But yeah,
Yeah.
that was sick. I think that's a good place to end it off on.